The involvement of Canada in World War I is something that literally nobody talks about. What did they do? Make maple syrup grenades? Ride into battle on moose? Yeah, that stuff, but they also did some pretty neat things to keep the Allies ahead. The one battle that really gave the Canadian soldiers their identity was the Battle of Vimy Ridge. What was the battle? How did it affect the outcome of the war? Let's figure it out. Eh? When World War I started, Canada was part of the British Empire, and like most countries ruled by a bigger country, they weren't a huge fan of this. So when the opportunity arose for the Canadians to take the reins of the Allied future, boy did they seize that opportunity. The Battle of Vimy Ridge gave Canadians a sense of independence from their British Empire, and gave the Allies a great advantage by taking the highest point in the Commune of Vimy, France. It's important to have a little bit of background before evaluating the outcome of Vimy Ridge. The battle happened closer to the end of the war, from April 9th to April 12th, 1917. At this time, both Allied and enemy forces were running out of supplies and recruits. The Russian Revolution threatened to push Russia, a huge Allied power, out of the war. Basically, time was of the essence and people wanted this war to be over pretty soon. The French and British had planned a new offensive, hoping to get rid of a German stalemate. Canadians were fighting amongst the British, and all were in hopes of getting Germany to waste its resources. Vimy Ridge was an important strategic position because of its high point and views towards the east. The Germans had held a very solid position there since the beginning of the war. More than 100,000 French soldiers had been injured trying to take them down. Keeping the Allies from getting through were 3 consecutive trenches, barbed wire, concrete machine gun bunkers. You get it. It was really hard to get into. The Canadian troops had been in France for a while, so they were in a really convenient position to help. But the land that they had to occupy had already been destroyed by shell casings. March of 1917 was super busy for the Canadian soldiers. They were carrying supplies into their bases in the dead of night to avoid the German glare. They built water systems, roads, underground housing, and in this process used 50,000 horses. A sawmill was even put up nearby to help with lumber needs. At night, Canadian raiding parties ventured across German lines to rattle the enemy, capture prisoners, and gather intelligence. The most important thing that was built were the 11 subway systems built so that the Allied forces would not need to cross no man's land without protection. These subways had water, lights, and first aid rooms. The plan of attack involved all 4 Canadian corps to attack up the ridge in a vertical formation, the first time all 4 would fight together as a unit. They were super careful to have well-defended trenches just because of previous failures in other battles. Soldiers were encouraged to think for themselves, and not every infantry soldier had a rifle. Explosives that worked on impact were used rather than the ones that you had to bury. More than 980 heavy artillery and guns were concentrated for this battle. It was important. The fighting! On the right, in the center of the assault, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Division arrived on the German front lines. The 3rd Division had it the easiest because of the wreckage caused by the 1st and 2nd Divisions. Enemy machine gun crews poured on to the 1st and 2nd Divisions, but the Canadians fought back. They ended up engaging a lot of hand-to-hand combat. Thousands of wounded men and German prisoners were dragged back to Allied lines. By late afternoon on April 9th, the 3 divisions had captured all their objectives on schedule, and most of Vimy Ridge was in Canadian hands. The Canadians had pushed the Germans back almost 5 kilometers, the greatest single Allied advancement up to that point in the war. The 4th Division struggled a lot more than the other 3. The 4th was assigned the far left flank, which involved the most difficult objectives. Each objective was heavily defended, ringed by well-fortified trenches, and with a clear view of where the Canadians would attack. But Vimy Ridge could not be captured by the Canadians if those objectives were not captured. Sounds a little bit unfair to me. Making matters even worse, during the 4th Division attack, they lost all contact with the artillery barrage that was supposed to be covering them. As a result, only minutes into the assault on April 9th, the Allied forces were under extreme fire. A lot of survivors couldn't move from their positions. By nightfall, no objectives were reached. But by April 12th, with help from the 4th Division Reserve battalions, all the objectives were captured despite very heavy snowfall. The fighting left 3,598 Canadians dead and another 7,000 wounded. There were an estimated 20,000 casualties on the German side. Another 4,000 Germans were taken prisoner. So, what did this fight do for the Canadians? As mentioned before, this was the first battle where all 4 Canadian corps fought together as one unit. Being such a large, sparsely populated country, and being ruled by Great Britain, Canada didn't have a great sense of nationalism. The Battle of Vimy changed that for sure. The unification of Canadian troops led to a greater sense of nationalism that traveled home from France to Canada. They had taken the ridge together, and without each other, the Germans would still have it. Vimy soon became a symbol of the Canadian experience in World War I. All in all, Canada had lost 60,000 soldiers in World War I, a sacrifice that convinced the Canadian Prime Minister to step out of Britain's shadow and fight for independence for Canada. To honor all the soldiers that died, a memorial was placed atop of Vimy Ridge, inscribed with the 11,285 unknown Canadians who died in France during World War I. Was the battle amplified to promote Canadian nationalism? Maybe. Would the Allies have won World War I without the Battle of Vimy Ridge? Probably. But was the battle a definite symbol of unity and independence in Canada? Absolutely. And that is the story of Vimy Ridge.